Welcome. I don't even know if welcome's the right word. Hi, I'm Lily. I'm really excited to share this with you, the keys to peace, love, and understanding. And that is me as a little girl wearing, I had this like jumpsuit that I loved, this Care Bear jogging suit. And I love it. I feel so happy in that picture. Or when I think of it, I was happy then. And I'm happy now. Okay. Sometimes I love to use these cards, like guidance cards, these goddess guidance cards, and then sometimes I forget about them. But I have thought about them again, and so I was like, I pulled a card to see what do you all need, and I got this card, Una. Easy does it. There is no need to hurry or force things to happen. Everything is occurring in perfect timing. Sometimes these cards are just spot on and sometimes they're not, but honestly, I usually pull something, whether it's for me or somebody that I feel like would be open and receptive to it. And it's like, oh, it's really cool. And I thought this one, how fitting. Easy does it. So you can call upon Una for help with your transitions, and so she'll guide you in creative and magical ways. So I thought, let's call on Una for your transition to being somebody experiencing more anxiety or maybe resisting your experience, somebody struggling with intrusive thoughts, struggling with health anxiety, struggling with physical symptoms, or just experiencing physical symptoms, whatever it is, your transition to being more of a human at peace living life, being more present, being more happy, being more confident, whatever that looks like for you. And also, there is no need to hurry or force that. There is no need to hurry or force the insights that you have. Everything is occurring in perfect timing. I love that. I just love it. And I hope you can just let this be background noise. You don't have to try to like memorize what I'm saying, like as if you're going to be tested on it later. Just listen for a feeling. If you're getting a feeling, you're getting it. Here's what we're going to cover today. 5 things I wanted to share. One is that you are pure potential. You are missing nothing. 2, you are always living in the feeling of your thinking. 3, your thoughts aren't always true. 4, you're designed to come back into balance. And 5, you're made of wisdom and common sense. So, number 1, let's get into it. You are pure potential. What do I mean by that? What's come kind of more clear to me in the past few months is like this analogy or metaphor of a toddler. You know, when a toddler, whether you're a parent or you've just seen kids, it can have like a big meltdown. You know, they really can, whether they're teething or just their schedule's off, or it's just they've woken up on the wrong side of the bed. They're just having a full on meltdown. They're not their happy go lucky selves. We know nothing's wrong with the toddler on the inside. They're perfectly fine. There's no big deal. We know if they take a nap or they just go to bed, they're going to wake up just back to their old selves, for lack of a better word. You know, the toddler's tantrum, or whether it's a toddler and they get sick and they're runny and their nose is runny and they've got diarrhea and they've got a flu and they're not themselves. We know that the flu, the tantrum, it cannot touch the toddler. Who they are is there. The same, I saw that so clearly these past few months with people that I talked to and with my own experience, where anxiety, and these are the words of Sid Banks, you know, it's this like psychological virus, you know, where if we got a cold or a flu, healthy us is right inside, you know, and you might be thinking, well, I have a chronic health condition. I do too. I have diabetes, but I'm still healthy. Healthy me is always here. Just because I have diabetes doesn't mean I'm unhealthy. But you know, when I had COVID, um, I was right inside. Me, healthy me, feeling good me. And if I've lost you, that's all right. We're going to bring it back to anxiety. Beneath every anxious feeling is our natural peace and well being. You don't have to work hard at it, it's in your nature. You know, it's really like you have everything that you're looking for. We just lose our bearings when we get anxious, when we experience a panic attack, when we hear about something that scares the shit out of us and we start taking it personally. We're the main player for our brain. So if we hear about a health condition or a health scary thing, cancer, heart attack, someone dying young, just someone dying, someone losing their mind, murder, shooting, our brain's like, ooh, it thinks about us, our family, our kids, ourselves. But all that happens is we just lost our bearings. That peace of mind, that presence, that calmness, it's here. It's just within us. You don't have to work hard at it. Where's my snow globe? I love the snow globe analogy because when you shake it up, you get shaken up, whether you just had a baby and you don't have as much sleep and your hormones are changing, and then you get a really weird thought and you're like, what the fuck did I get that thought? What does it mean about me? Oh my God, am I a murderer? Could I be a pedophile? Or whatever. You got a health thing going on. You have all these thoughts. You got really shaken up. Maybe you're having a panic attack. You got all these physical symptoms. That's the snow. Your peace of mind and natural well-being are always inside. They just get covered up. So there you are, pure potential, everything you're looking for. We don't have to do much besides let ourselves settle. Also, you are divine energy in disguise. I heard Dr. Pettit say that actually when he was talking about depression. He was like, one message I really wish people got was that you are divine energy in disguise. Mental well-being is inside of you. And that, if you don't know exactly what I'm talking about, no big deal. No big deal. Just get that feeling, well, what does that mean? What does that mean? What if the only thing wrong with you is that you think something is wrong with you? And you might be saying, no, I have diabetes and my kid is an alcoholic and I actually had a bad breast scan, or I have these really disturbing thoughts and I have a history of mental illness. We can think of all these reasons. I had somebody email me the other day and she said she watched my master class and she could see that everything why I was experiencing anxiety was my thoughts. She's like, but I've got real problems. And I totally know what she means, because our what we're dealing with can seem really real. And I'm not denying that there is not real stuff when it's loss, when it's illness, when it seems like a financial thing. But what I was experiencing, there was real stuff going on, and with every one of my clients. But you know how people can respond differently? Where a divorce doesn't necessarily always equal sadness, or a move doesn't equal a nervous breakdown, or where some people love roller coasters and some people love dogs and some people are terrified of dogs and some people are terrified of roller coasters. We're going to get into all of this, but let me bring us back. What we think is not always true. We can think something is wrong with me. I just want you to open up. What if the only thing that's wrong with you is that you think there's something wrong with you? And I think you're going to get what I mean a little bit more when I'm going to read to you. I tried to do a picture, but Canva was not wanting to work with me. This is backwards, but here is Amy Johnson's book, Just a Thought. I love it. I recommend the whole book. But I wanted to read to you a little bit from the chapter 4 on who you are, the analogy or the story of the Golden Buddha. You might have heard it already, and this is how Amy Johnson writes about it. Somewhere around the 13th century in Bangkok, Thailand, a massive statue of the Buddha was made of pure gold. Not long after the statue was created, Burmese soldiers invaded Thailand. In a flash of insight, the Thai people covered the golden Buddha in stucco and glass to hide its value and keep it safe from the invaders. Who would want a huge, heavy Buddha statue made of sand and dirt? The invaders came and went, and the statue was spared. The few people who knew the true nature of the golden Buddha eventually died. Then, in the 1960s, when the statue was being moved from one temple to another, it was dropped. The plaster cracked, and a pure gold toe shined through Buddha's dirty facade. The crack in the facade meant the gig was up. The golden Buddha's shiny, perfect nature was realized. When that scary thing happened to you, and you retreated into your head, your mind created a facade to keep you safe. Your mind told you the kind of person you were, and the way you needed to be from then forward to be accepted and safe. Because those strategies in the facade felt like safety, you looked toward and identified with them more and more, and you looked toward and identified with your true nature less and less. The psychological experience moving through you took center stage, and your expansive, nonverbal essence fell to the background. You slowly but surely mistook fleeting thoughts, feelings, and behaviors for who you are. You slowly but surely fell asleep to your true nature. But nothing about who you are has ever changed. You're as peaceful and loving and connected to all of life as you've always been. You've simply gotten into the habit of listening to your mind a little too closely. We listen so closely to the narrator, our conditioned, habitual, machine like mind. I kind of think of it as the brain, that it becomes all we hear. And then one day you get dropped. You go through a breakup or a breakdown. You find yourself anxious, sick, or with addiction you can't kick. You lose your job, you can't get pregnant, or you can, but your kids grow up and you no longer recognize who you thought you were. You get dropped. And you're unable to pick yourself up and go back to how things were, which is excellent news. You're dropped so hard a crack is formed, and you're forced to look beyond the appearance of things. You catch a glimpse of what's there beyond the facade. Insights into who you are don't require an identity crisis. That's just one opportunity to look deeper. Insights into who you are can come from openness and curiosity, a willingness to look beyond surface level appearances and not take your moment to moment thoughts as truth. It takes a willingness to look towards something with which you are deeply acquainted, but also unaware. You are willing, or you wouldn't be reading this book. And I'd say you are willing, or you wouldn't be here watching this video. Welcome. So going off of that, you are pure potential. You already have everything you are looking for: peace, presence, confidence, ease, just a good feeling. What if it's just that you had too much noise in your head and you felt yucky because of it, and then you took those yucky thoughts as truth, even when you felt better? That's what happens sometimes. Having a really noisy head, being shaken up, it often does not feel good. And then we have weird thoughts and we think they're true. This is a quote from Nicola Bird and her book, A Little Peace of Mind. I only have the digital copy, so I can't hold it up for you. But I love Nicola Bird. And she wrote, "Anxiety is just a huge amount of swirling, fast, frantic thoughts, and its corresponding feelings that get stuck by our very efforts to be rid of it. We label it, decide it's a thing, and by doing so, hold it more firmly in place." Can you see that? I didn't know that. I didn't know that until I came into the Three Principles conversation. Nicola was one of the first people that I came to. Sari Taylor and then Nicola Bird, and I really identified with them so much because they seemed like their anxiety was just as bad as mine. You know, Nicola and Sari, both their anxiety was very severe, and they went to a mental hospital, separately. But I'll talk about Nicola since her name is up here. And that was always one of my worst fears. I thought, well, if my anxiety gets so bad, especially after I had panic attacks that involved derealization and depersonalization, I felt like I was losing my mind. And so I would have this thought, like, you could really lose your mind and you'd have to go to a mental hospital. And I would think, I thought that there was like a kind of a place of no return. Like, well, what would happen after that? Could I be a school psychologist? Could I still be a mom? And then when I saw Nicola and Sari, who had both been psychotherapists, and their anxiety had been so bad, and they went to a mental hospital, and then they returned to balance. I don't think the insights that they had in the hospital were like life-changing until they came to the Three Principles, but still, they returned to balance. They returned to that place of peace and well-being, being psychotherapists, then being anxiety coaches. And I was like, oh, so there's not a place of no return. Going to a hospital wouldn't be that bad. Like, it really popped the balloon of this fear of insanity. And also, I just felt like, oh, they get it. They had really, really bad anxiety. And the Three Principles worked for them. They were the first people that one shared something that hit me deep. And the principles hit me deep. And I'm like, their anxiety was just as bad as mine. Most people that I talk to, they feel like how I experienced anxiety was just as bad as them. I've had a few people that say, I think yours was worse. Like I didn't have it as bad as you, which is also okay. There's no prize. um, but I love Nicola. I recommend her book, A Little Peace of Mind. I love her podcast too, which goes by the same name, A Little Peace of Mind. I also wanted to share this, that you don't need to worry about having a feeling of anxiety. Like what if you just opened up to this? What if you did not need to worry about experiencing anxiety? You knew it was just a normal human emotion, and the less attention you gave it, the better. Because I know when I experienced it, it was like, oh my God, I got to do something about this, and I got to make sure it ends right now. And what's its message? And how do I make sure I never happen it again? A lot of resistance, a lot of analyzing when it came to anxiety. This is another one of my teachers, Michael Neal, who I just love. And one of his articles called The Universal Diagnosis and the Universal Medicine, I share it with at least half of every client that I've ever talked to. It just finds like this would be great to either read to them or to share with them. So you can Google it. It's called The Universal Diagnosis, Michael Neal. You'll get the full article. But I want to read you a little bit. When you start to see that all of our problems stem from the universal diagnosis, too much noise in head, and you might be like, what do you mean? It can be too much noise around your job, or maybe your own health, or the health of your child, or just the potential that like there is cancer and there's strokes and there's Alzheimer's and there's X, Y, and Z. Like we have a lot of noise about that. Or it might be the noise of just trying to be the best mom you can be, the best person you can be. It doesn't have to be like big and scary. Just sometimes we become almost like tuned out to how much we're thinking, how much time we're spending in our head. So that's what I talk about, of like the noise in our head. So when you start to see that all of our problems stem from the universal diagnosis, too much noise in head, you also see that the solution is never more than one thought away, a dropping of whatever thought is occupying your mind, filling up your bandwidth, and making it seem as though you need to sort out anything and everything in your life before you could possibly relax, enjoy, and engage with whatever is happening right here, right now. And when you can get on to yourself, and because too much noise in head doesn't feel good, you're like, oh, that's what it is. My head's noisy. I'm taking life too seriously. I'm taking myself too seriously. And you'll have whatever that means for you. Those are my go-tos. You are already a whole, perfect person, filled with wisdom and common sense, creativity, humor, love, and understanding. That's what I mean when I say you are pure potential. You are missing nothing. And I can't take credit. I don't know who I first heard pure potential. Sid Banks, Dr. Pettit. Like you are already whole, perfect, full of wisdom and common sense, really. In my one of my master classes, the one on how to simply break free from anxiety, I say, I think it's that there's nothing wrong with you. And then somebody had written to me and they said, but you say that and there is something wrong with me. I have a health condition, and so I'm saying this of like there is a part of you that remains untouched. That person that no matter what's going on is whole and perfect and filled with wisdom, common sense, creativity, humor, love, and understanding. You really are missing nothing. You already have everything you're looking for. The only thing that stops you from believing that is a thought. And this is sometimes I hesitate, like I'm like, I don't want to lose some of you, but feel free, let go of the stuff that I say that you do not like. Like there's that God inside of you. And I don't mean it has to be like God, like a white man or God of anything, but it's like that. When I think of that, because I wasn't raised with any religion, I more think of it as spiritual and just like this nature, that's fact that we can grow babies and an acorn grows into an oak tree. And like, I just see it in nature, this God in you You already have it. Like, that's the divine intelligence in disguise, like this oneness, this, like, it's such a miracle that we are even here. Like, oh, and the only thing that stops us is believing a thought. And sometimes it's not just the one thought, it's the 10,000 thoughts. But it's like, really. And I don't always feel like this, but sometimes I'm blown away by like what a magical divine being I am. But it's not just because it's like, I don't think I'm special. You are special, and you and you and you and you know, like, you are pure potential. We all have this divine energy. Okay. 2, you're always living in the feeling of your thinking. Always, always. I'm going to get into what that means more. But first of all, thought is a gift. And what do I mean by that? We can use thought to think in enjoyable ways, like thinking of past memories that feel good, what we might cook for dinner, creativity, dreams, aspirations. Sometimes we're just present. I talk a lot about how we can innocently misuse the gift of thought, to scare ourselves, and we think about scary things in the future, or maybe scary things about ourselves. But I was reading Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, and what came to me was how we can use thought in such a beautiful way. Like, he was going back into the past, but not to like think of scary memories. Like, his imagination and his thoughts put him in such a good place that even being in a concentration camp, he was in a good feeling some of the time. So I wanted to read you some of those quotes. And this, I think, really also illustrates the first one, where even though Victor's outside surroundings were horror and a concentration camp, he tapped in to that divine inside him. So he writes, "Then I grasped the meaning of the greatest secret that human poetry and human thought and belief have to impart. The salvation of man is through love and in love. I understood how a man who has nothing left in this world still may know bliss, be it for only a brief moment in the contemplation of his beloved." And Victor wrote that because he would think of his wife and he would imagine her alive. And that just filled him with such good feelings. It's even when I read those quotes, like, it makes me feel so emotional. Like, it hits on this deeper level, because intellectually I'm like, what makes you, I can't express with my words how this touches me. Like, and maybe I will reach a point where I can, but every time I read it, I'm filled with such emotion that I can't express. Love goes very far beyond the physical person of the beloved. It finds its deepest meaning in his spiritual being, his inner self, whether or not he is actually present, whether or not he is still alive at all, ceases somehow to be of importance. I did not know. This intensification of inner life helped the prisoner find a refuge from the emptiness, desolation, and spiritual poverty of his existence by letting him escape into the past. And it was such a interesting thing to read that, because oftentimes for me and the clients that I work with, our surroundings are actually like great. And it's our inner, the inner life that we make up and scare ourselves, that it's like, and with Victor, he's writing about it was the opposite. And that's how thought is a gift. And sometimes we innocently misuse this gift. But there is no judgment. I misuse the gift of thought, and sometimes I still do. Sometimes I take work and business and money too seriously. But this is all like, we can see what a fucking gift. What a gift thought is. Life-saving. Sometimes we get lost in thoughts that don't feel good, though, and we suffer. And that suffering is a wake-up call. It's a gift, though. Again, the suffering is a gift. Victor's good feelings weren't coming from out there. the concentration camp. They were not. It was coming from his thoughts. You know, when we have thoughts and they get brought to life, that's how it works. Like he was living in the feeling of his thinking. He wasn't living in the feeling of his reality. The reality was his wife was dead. I think he had a child who, they were dead. He was in a concentration camp, but he was living in a good feeling. He was living in the feeling of his thinking. And anxiety, it is not coming from out there. It's always coming from a momentary thought and feeling flowing through us. And I do not want you to feel bad. Please, if you are, like, shove that judgment away. I remember when I first, it was like a little bit newer when I was in the Three Principles. And I heard this story of a man who was just in great physical and mental health. And he was in his early 100s. And somebody had gone to interview him. And he was in like a hospital, mental health hospital, because at the time, when his farm had burned down, he didn't have any family. And so when somebody didn't have a lot of money or family, they were just like put into a mental institution. But he just thrived. He was happy. He'd walk the grounds. And so it was a psychologist or a psychiatrist that went to interview him. And they were like asking him. And in his earlier life, before that, he had been put in jail. He was Black. And he just smiled at a white woman. And they threw him in jail. The point of that story is that they were like, he's like, what's your secret? And the guy's like, well, I haven't been angry for more than 30 seconds. And he's like, what about when you were just thrown in jail? And he was like, well, that wouldn't have done me any good, and it would have ruined my day. And later on, his farm was burned down. And I shared that of when I heard that story, it's like I wanted to instantly be him. I wanted to never hold on to anger for more than 30 seconds. So I heard that story and it was like, oh, there's the key. Letting go of anger. But then I'd find myself, and I'm not a very angry person. It was more like getting irritated or judgmental. And I'd say, I'm not that man. I'm not that man. And I'm still not that man. But I'm closer to that, I'm closer to getting on to myself and letting things go than I was when I first heard that story 3 years ago. So our uneasy, unpleasant, anxious feelings are thought generated. They only ever come from within us. They're just coming and going. I know I got a little off track when I was sharing that story. And so to kind of bring it full circle, I don't want you to hear about Viktor Frankl or maybe even compare yourself to me and think, oh, you know, if you notice yourself getting caught up, because you can only ever be where you are and you can only see what you've seen, and we can only be grateful for that. And it's truly when you can see without judgment, then you've got freedom. And I share this kind of going back to here. It is so crazy. It's never coming from out there. It's because it's just, our uneasy, unpleasant, and anxious feelings. They're thought generated. But it's all right. You don't need to be like, okay, I got to identify the thought. Because sometimes, you know, you can just have a bad feeling and you're like, I don't really know. I mean, you're not really aware of any thoughts. There are some times when I'm going to the airport, especially if I'm like departing from Los Angeles, my home. I'm not really aware exactly of what my thoughts are, but there's that unease in my stomach. So I know that there's thoughts going on. But it was so funny. I just went to Sacramento with my kids and I met my sisters there. And we then drove to Yosemite. So the day of flying out from Los Angeles, I had that uneasy stomach. But I don't know where the thought, it's not a big deal. And I just thought, well, sometimes just traveling, I'm not really aware of these uneasy, anxious thoughts, but I don't pay too much mind to them. It's not a big deal because they always just come and go. But then when we were flying back from Sacramento, I wasn't driving. I was also actually, I was sick. It's like kind of coming down with something. But it was really interesting because I kind of was like, had this thought of like, oh no, what if I feel sick? But I just let it come and go. And we had a 4-hour drive from Yosemite to Sacramento. And I actually felt great. I just chilled in the back. I was in the way back with my son. And I wasn't like thinking too much that we were going to the airport, even though I obviously knew we were. That was like the destination. um, and I got to the airport and we checked in, and it was like my kids and I had dinner. It was like probably one of the best airport experiences I've had. And it was funny because as we were checking in, I was like, oh, I never had any anxiety. And as I said, for me, it's just usually I feel it in that unease in the stomach. I just never there weren't thoughts, so there wasn't the feelings. But back to this, it's the coming and going part, life changing. We're going to get into that more. But for this, so because we know anxiety is never coming from out there, it's always only coming from within us, this momentary thought and feeling, we can say driving does not cause anxiety. If it did, everybody would feel anxious driving, you know? And there are people that love it. What was funny to me, so I experienced my first panic attack when I was driving on the freeway, and then I struggled with driving anxiety for 7 years. And I would sometimes think back to this time because before I had my panic attack and driving anxiety, I was really into CrossFit and I wanted to go to like the Unlimited. But I thought, well, I need to get like a side job. And this was before Uber and Lyft. And so I went on to Craigslist and I picked this job where a woman was experiencing night blindness. So I'd like bring her to her job and I'd pick her up at night. It didn't last very long because I was like, I take this too seriously. But like, I think back, like I picked driving as a job and I used to love driving in high school and then in my 20s. Like, I just love driving. So driving doesn't cause anxiety. Travel doesn't cause anxiety because some people love to travel. Some people even love turbulence, you know? Crazy. It's funny. I My relationship to travel has evolved. My relationship, my thoughts around turbulence and flying is still evolving. And I used to hate takeoff and I hated turbulence. And it was funny that fabulous Sacramento airport flight time. We just, oh, my kids and I were in such a good feeling. And we were in the airport for a long time, but we had a fabulous dinner and our flight was even delayed. We were like, we do not mind. We were in a good feeling. And so in our whole good feeling, um, and that's kind of where it goes into state of mind too. We were just in a good feeling. I get on the plane and my brain started to be like, what if you feel anxious during takeoff? And it was like almost like, it couldn't hook me in. It couldn't hook me in. I was like, it was almost like like trying to scare myself, but I didn't. I was just like, meh, we just had a great flight. So travel doesn't cause anxiety. Vomit doesn't cause anxiety. I don't think anybody likes vomit. I mean, maybe there is somebody with a vomit kink. DM me, email me if you know someone with a vomit kink. There probably is, probably. Um, but there are some people that the fear of throwing up can really, really impact their lives. So I think thoughts around vomit probably are on a spectrum where I don't like it. Sometimes I've had some kind of fear of throwing up getting in the way. But for some people, it really stops them from living a full life. When I had asked my Instagram community about fear of throwing up, it was the most messages, the most communication I got. But I do want to post you, vomit doesn't equal anxiety. Because for a lot of people, it's like, what? Oh, I feel nauseous even talking about it. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Almost every time I talk about throw up, when I have a video on the fear of throwing up, and I've got very nauseous. I'm not sick. No one's throwing up. I'm feeling nauseous because of my thinking, because I'm talking about vomit. That's the power of thought. Wow. It's like I almost feel very ill. Moving on, because thought's always coming and going. I'm never stuck. I don't have to worry. I could be free to stop this, but like my thoughts are going to change because we're going to talk about death. Death also does not equal anxiety. There are some people that so are at peace with death. There are some people that are afraid to go to sleep because they die. And, but when we can know, what I want to put on the table is that it's always our thinking about it. Your thinking about it does. And it's the most freeing, liberating thing ever. Really is. Because I'm not saying you have to make peace with any of those. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying this pure potential. Wow, my experience could change. Or, like, as I said, I kind of made peace that sometimes I didn't love takeoff or turbulence. But because I accepted it just like, it was so much easier to bear with. I just have I don't really identify with having flight anxiety, travel anxiety. It's just this acceptance and this understanding that's life changing. And that's what I'm hoping you're getting a taste of. When we are able to realize that the source of our anxiety is our thinking in the moment, our anxiety clears and makes way for insight. We return to our innate state of resiliency. And that is in Joseph Bailey's book, Thriving in the Eye of the Hurricane. And I read that, but I didn't really hear it. So I might read it again. And when I mean that, I read it, but I heard it with maybe a lowercase h, like it didn't sink into me. And maybe it sank into you. Maybe my thoughts were on something else. Actually, I know they were. I was reading it, but I was actually thinking, are people going to be annoyed that the little circle video of me is moving around? Should I have thought it through? And so I missed the feeling of that quote. When we are able to realize that the source of our anxiety is our thinking in the moment, our anxiety clears and makes way for insight. We return to our innate state of resiliency. Those are kind of merging. The first one, you're a pure potential. You have that resiliency inside of you. And that we're always just living in the feeling of our thinking, which is just coming and going. And now we're going to move on to 3. Your thoughts aren't always telling you the truth. I wanted to read a little bit from Sid Banks's book, The Missing Link. And this is from his chapter on thought. The Missing Link is one of the hard copies that I do have. When I worked with Dr. Pettit, when we were doing, I did his alert certification program. He was my mentor for like just almost a little under a year. It was such a gift. We would often go to The Missing Link. And I had The Missing Link, a digital copy on my Kindle. And he was like, this is one book I'd recommend getting a hard copy of. And I'm so happy he said that, because I find myself going again and again to Sid's words, and especially The Missing Link. And maybe I might get a copy of Second Chance and some of the other ones. I do want to say also, I had a hard time understanding Sid 5 years ago. And that's okay. I so really wanted to feel better. And I was trying to understand Sid with my intellect. And I was like, he's not a woman talking to me about anxiety. What's he saying? And I didn't give him a chance. And now I can so hear Sid. I'm part of the 3 Principles Global Community. That's where I became a registered practitioner. And actually yesterday was the 50th anniversary of Sid's enlightenment and his insights. And so they shared a new video from a Vancouver lecture. And I was just listening to the video and I felt like I got it. Not that it's not like I'm like, I know exactly what Sid's saying, but I heard what he was saying. And more than that, I was just in a good feeling. So I want to say that you don't have to understand when I'm going to read to you Sid's words. You don't have to get it. And in fact, you can't. You don't want to understand it intellectually. Just listen for a feeling. Thought on its own is a completely neutral gift. Thought is not reality, yet it is through thought that our realities are created. It is what we as humans put into our thoughts that dictate what we think of life. And I wanted to share these pictures, because the thought is not reality. There's that story of like a rope and a snake. And Amy actually writes about it in her book. There's a little wonderful excerpt. But we can see something up in the road. Say you're on a hike and you think it's a snake. Your brain is like snake. Your heart could start pounding. You could start trying to think of like, oh my God, what am I going to do if that snake bites me? What am I going to do if that snake bites my kid? Oh my God, I can't believe it. Like trying to think of how you're going to save your life. You're living in that feeling of shit, I'm coming up to a snake, or oh my God, there's a snake right there. And then as you get closer, you realize it's a rope. You're like, oh. But before that, you were living in the feeling that you could be in danger. But then when you realize it's a rope, you're like, oh, it doesn't mean your heart immediately stops pounding. You might have started a stress response and you go back to balance. But that's just what happens. Sometimes our thoughts are not always true. You might have the thought, there is a snake up ahead. That might not be true because it might be a rope. I have this plant behind me. You can see a little bit of it. And I don't know, I'm not the best with plants, but this one has survived. But often these little leaves fall off. And so, there was one of those leaves was in this area over there a couple months ago. And I saw it and my brain was like, snake. And I was like, it was funny because immediately after I'm like, leaf, leaf. And the other day I was walking and I saw something. We have a lot of little lizards in my neighborhood, just free little lizards. Yeah, lizards. And so I saw this thing, but it looked big. It was like up on the sidewalk. And I was like, oh, what if that was like a really big lizard? But I knew it wasn't. I thought it was a big leaf on the ground. And it was like my brain kept kind of shape shifting it of like, maybe it's a lizard. I'm like, it's a leaf. And it was just a dog bag. It was like a poop bag, but a big green one. And it was like, oh, that wasn't what I was thinking at all. I thought, oh, this is interesting. I'm going to come upon it and it's going to be a leaf. I didn't know it was bag, but that was the reality, was that it was a bag. So in this, you might have all types of thoughts about who you are. You might, oh, I'm just an anxious person, and or I'm going to have OCD forever. But actually, you know what? Maybe this is an OCD. Maybe I could just really be a pedophile, or I could lose my mind, or I could harm somebody, or maybe I am going to die young. Whatever those thoughts are. Like, I'm fucked up. I'm the one. Okay, this might have worked for her. It's not going to work for me. I have to worry. Whatever your thoughts are, it's like, just because we think them doesn't mean it's true. I bet you can think of examples too. I always like a texting one, where if you have somebody that you text with all the time and they usually write back pretty quickly, maybe a partner or a best friend or a family member, and then you text them and it takes them hours and hours. And so you have the thought, they're dead. You might start to get really worried and you can feel like that's true. And then when they text you, oh my gosh, I left my phone in the Uber, or oh my gosh, my phone died. You're like, ah. Oh. But until then, you felt like that was true because we feel our thinking, whether or not it's true. But it's amazing when you can get onto yourself and you can be like, you can know just because you feel something doesn't mean it's true. And just because you feel something strongly doesn't mean it's true. I didn't know that. When I was little, or even when I was not little, I would have a thought and then I'd have a feeling like my heart would break or my stomach would hurt, whether I thought, my parents could die or bad things could happen. And then I got older, sometimes I'd worry about social stuff like, oh, so-and-so, I was annoying. Maybe I talked too much about myself. Like I would get a bad feeling. And I kind of thought like, yep, that is true. But it was not. It was just feeling my thinking. So what I'm talking about is consciousness. It brings our thoughts to life. Consciousness, it gives us a full experience of life. It brings our thoughts to life whether or not they are true. So there could be somebody at work and they might be thinking like, oh my God, I'm killing it. I'm going to be a millionaire, and say it's somebody who's starting out. And maybe let's say they're a coach and they're watching one of those programs. It's like, oh my God, you can 10x it. You can turn your 10K months into 100K. And they're like, oh my God, maybe it's somebody and they're planning their wedding and they're planning their wedding and they're planning their honeymoon and they're just in such a good feeling. They're like, yes, it's all coming to life. That same person though could be worried about their headache and they're like, it's probably a brain tumor. I am going to die before my wedding. I shouldn't even worry about my money because I will die. And that's how they can feel. Consciousness brings our thoughts to life, whether or not they're true. But when we can get onto that and be like, getting onto ourselves is really key. A little more unconsciousness. I love this meme. So there's a woman and a man, a couple, and she's thinking, he's probably thinking about other girls. And that might feel true to her. If she's there, she's like, he's thinking of other girls. She's like, oh my God, I can't believe it. We're going to break up. Like, he doesn't love me. That's probably why we didn't have sex. Like, or also, oh, this is what happened to my body, blah, blah, blah. She's got all these thoughts. She's got all these feelings. And she's thinking them and she's feeling them, whether or not they're true. Because in this example, he's there and he's thinking, why would Cinderella's shoe fall off? It fits her perfectly. He's not thinking about anything of his wife. He could be in love with her. Or a more realistic thing, he might be thinking there about work, or maybe about something else. And he's just as in love with her and wants to sleep with her and wants everything. And he's in his head about something. Consciousness doesn't care what I think. It gives me a real experience of any thought I come up with. Then it seduces me into believing the reality of it, making me forget completely. It is my own creation of illusion tricking me. Yet it's all me. Me. If I were not creating worry, it would not exist. And that is from Jack Pransky's book, Seduced by Consciousness, which I love. It is such a good book. Highly recommend. Sid also has a chapter on consciousness in The Missing Link. Because one part of consciousness is it brings our thoughts to life, but also this other part that consciousness, it's like our state of mind. It descends and then it ascends. So as our consciousness descends, as it lowers, we lose our feelings of love and understanding and experience a world of emptiness, bewilderment, and despair. So in the previous example, the woman in bed, her state of consciousness was lower. She lost that loving feeling and understanding. She might have felt empty, bewildered, and in despair. I love this quote by Einstein. I think 99 times and find nothing. I stop thinking, swim in silence, and the truth comes to me. And I put that there because when we are in a lower state of consciousness, we just think more and we find nothing because we're not in a good state of mind. Mike O'Neill, he has a great podcast episode called something to do with snow globe, but he said, I will never see more clearly by thinking more. And if we're thinking of that, we're not going to see clearly. But when we stop thinking, swim in silence, the truth comes to us. Again, it's like you have everything you're looking for. It's often just not where you're looking. It's not in that low state of mind. It's not in analysis. We are taught we must think to find a solution. In higher consciousness, we find that things work the opposite way. After all, it is our thoughts and hang-ups that got us into this mess in the first place. It's life-changing when you see what you're looking for is found in quiet and a feeling. And it's just you start to know anytime I don't feel good, I'm not going to pay attention to what I'm thinking. Oh, and I put that there too. If you've had a period, like in PMS, your thoughts can be just really off. Like the day before your period, or I don't know where it is for you in your cycle. Sometimes it's like the days before I can have bad feelings about my body, bad feelings about my relationship, bad feelings about my work. But I'm 41, so I've been going through the hormonal cycle for a long time. But sometimes it feels true. Most of the time it does feel true, but I'm onto myself. Because really, anytime I don't feel good, there is a larger part of me that does not pay attention to what I'm thinking. Because in this period example, if you were trying to solve all your problems, you kind of know especially if you track your cycle. Some people do, and it's like, sometimes you wait a minute and you start bleeding the next day, and you're like, oh my God, that makes sense. I remember one time, and this makes me sound like a bad parent, or a very normal parent. Also, it was because I was trying to follow this diet. It was many years ago, like 13 years ago. And so I was only allowed to eat like a certain little amount of sushi. And so I ordered my one roll that I could eat, and I was really hungry. And my daughter, who was like 3 at the time or something, like took one roll, and I was like, "You can have one." Then she went to take another, and I think I was like, "Oh, what the fuck," which is so mean. And I would never say. And I remember being like, "Oh my god!" And then the next day, I woke up and I had my period. And I'm like, "Oh, that makes sense." As I've already said, anytime you don't feel good, pay no attention to what you're thinking. Really, if there is something that is true there, you'll see it. You really like, because some people, when I've said this, I've said it a lot. Like, "Oh, but shouldn't I investigate?" No, your thoughts are going to be fucking bullshit. They really are. Dick Bettinger, who was my teacher, and his teacher was Sid, he has one of my favorite videos. Oh, wait, I think maybe do I show you a picture of it? No. Maybe I might later on. It is such a good video. It's like I've almost memorized it. Because he said it's not that anybody that's become wise has said, "All right, when you're at your very worst, write down everything that you're thinking." That's true. Like, it's not. We know it, but then we don't, because sometimes I used to think that when I didn't feel good, it was like, yeah, my thoughts are on track. But no. Anytime you don't feel good, pay no attention to what you're thinking. Ignore it. Let it go. Let your state of consciousness ride. Let your mood rise, because that's where the insights are. That's where the truth is, not down there. Also, the goal isn't always to be like, "Oh no, I did something wrong if I don't feel good." No, because with consciousness too, like, just sometimes, you feel like you woke up on the wrong side of the bed, or it's a hormonal thing, or just whatever. We're not going to be robots. Like, I'm sharing this with you because it changes your life, but you get to be a human. And sometimes shit happens. Life happens. Sid would say life is a contact sport. You're going to get your knocks. And it's not the knocks that count, but it's how you handle them. And so if you get a knock and you're in a lower mood, that's okay. That's okay. You didn't do anything wrong. The goal is not to, like, I'm always going to be in a high state of consciousness and I'm always going to feel good. And if I don't feel good, I did something wrong. No, it's that you're a human. You're going to have highs and you're going to have lows, and we're going to be graceful with your lows. Do not take your thinking seriously, because it's going to be shitty. Don't take your bad thinking about yourself. If you have the thought, "Oh, I'd love to go on a walk. I'd love to make a dinner. Oh, chicken soup's always so soothing." Or like, "Oh, I'd like to reach out to Lily." Like, sure, you can follow some train of thoughts, but don't take the shitty, don't take your stinking thinking seriously. And just know, be open to your mood changing too, really, because our thoughts are coming and going. And you don't have to do it perfectly at all. I don't do it perfectly. But having this understanding really allows me to flow through my experience, flow through my ups and downs, and be more of a human at peace with living life. There is a letter that I love from Mavis Karn. I wonder, I might read you the full letter. It's another book that I love called It's That Simple. It's a user's manual for human beings by Mavis Karn. And Mavis is Michael's teacher, and Michael worked with Mavis on this. And so in some of my courses, I've read a few of these letters. Oh, actually, you know what? It was a lot. I read a lot when I was doing the Instagram subscription. But I had asked Michael, I said, "Can I read some of these letters and share them? Is that okay with you and Mavis?" And he said, "Yes, please." So here is letter 1, the whole user's manual in a nutshell. Dear kids and former kids, I have a secret to tell you. Nobody meant to keep it from you. It's just that it's been one of those things that's so obvious that people couldn't see it, like looking all over for the keys that you have in your hand. The secret is that you are already a completely whole, perfect person. You are not damaged goods. You are not incomplete. You are not flawed. You are not unfinished. You do not need remodeling, fixing, polishing, or major rehabilitation. You already have within you everything you need to live a wonderful life. You have common sense, wisdom, genius, creativity, humor, and self-esteem. You are pure potential. You are missing nothing. The only thing that can keep you from enjoying all that you already have is a thought. One thought, your thought, not someone else's thought, your thought. Whatever thought you are thinking at the moment that feels more important to think than feeling grateful, alive, content, joyful, optimistic, loving, and at peace. That's the only thing that's between you and happiness. And guess who's in charge of your thinking? Guess who gets to decide where your attention goes? Guess who gets to write, produce, direct, and star at the moment you're in the middle of? You. Just you. Not your past, stored thought. Not the future. Did you ever notice that it never ever shows up? Not your parents. They all think their own thoughts. Or your friends. Ditto. Or school or media or situation or circumstances or anything. Just you. Thinking is an awesome capability. Like any capability, it can be used whether as a tool or as a weapon against ourselves and others. And just like with any other tool, we can tell whether we're using it for or against ourselves by how it feels. When we think against ourselves or others, we get in trouble. When we don't, we usually stay out of trouble. And this is actually what I put on the screen about feelings. I don't know if I had originally intended to read you the whole letter, but it was meant to be because I did. Feelings exist to warn us away from using our thinking, to create trouble in our lives, and to guide us back to our natural, healthy ability to live our lives to the fullest. So please remember that your thoughts are not always telling you the truth. When we're in low moods, feeling down, our thoughts are not to be trusted. Our IQ drops. When our thoughts pass and we lighten up, our thinking is once again creative, positive. Our IQ goes up. The only way you can feel badly about yourself and your life is if you think badly about them. It's up to you every single minute you're alive. It's always up to you. This is the best, most liberating secret I've ever learned, and I want you to know it too. With love, Mavis. And I want to say from my own experience, when she said the only way you can think badly about yourself, you can feel badly about yourself and your life is if you think badly. To me, it's if you take those thoughts seriously. Because I can't sometimes help it when I feel low. I do have bad thoughts about myself and my life. And there is a part of me that thinks they are true. But there is a larger part of me, this like 90% of me, that knows this, that knows the secret, that knows what I'm sharing with you so deeply. So you are free to have any thoughts. That's the most liberating secret too, which Mavis said. It's not the thoughts, it's when we take them seriously. It's not the thoughts, it's but what we do with them. And when you can see, wow, that is such a gift. My thoughts are neutral. They're just coming and going. And sometimes when I'm low, or I've got a lot of noise in my head, my thoughts are kind of shitty. And sometimes I can feel shitty. But I can remember that these feelings exist to warn me away from maybe taking my thinking too seriously. It can be an invitation to get present, to let my thoughts flow, which I think maybe is what I'm going to talk about next. You are designed to come back to balance. I didn't know that. That our thoughts and our experience is transient. It's coming and going. So thoughts, they come from this formless, and then they come into our experience. Sometimes they're thinky thoughts like, I'm hungry, which I am. And actually that's a thought, but that's also a feeling. I'm having, but even though it's a feeling, it's a thought. Because actually we experience everything via the gift of thought, whether it's memories or it's pain or it's these, all those things that are in that bubble. That's all thought with a capital T. And some of those are thinky thoughts. But we experience life via thought. Because your thoughts are transient, you are always only one thought away from a whole new experience. You are never stuck. That is so freeing, because what I'm not telling you is you need to carry ice and sour candies and do some tapping and do some meditation. And also, you are free to do that if you're like, you know what? I'd love to eat a sour candy when I feel anxious. Great, carry on. But what I'm saying is the only tool you really need is this understanding and knowing when you're feeling or thinking, then you've got freedom because you can be in the middle seat on an airplane feeling super anxious and super panicky. And then, sure, it might occur to you to go up, but you can also know if you have to sit there because you're landing, your experience is transitory. You're just feeling this energy and you can sit there and you will return to balance. You can be in a meeting, you can be getting waxed, getting a facial, getting your hair done. Sometimes I talk to people and they get afraid to get their hair done or their eyelashes tinted or eyelash extensions put on because they're like, well, what if I panic? That they think that like they experience, they're going to panic. Oh, I got to get out of here. But it's so freeing when you know that you're always feeling your thinking, that your thoughts always flow, that you always come back into balance. Anxiety is free to show up when you're lying there getting your eyelashes done. And you don't need to leave to feel better. You're welcome to leave, but you're also to know, oh, I'm just one thought away. And you don't need to do anything. Thoughts come and go. I don't know when it was, a while ago, it was when I was running a live group. And that was what somebody did. They had really wanted to get their eyelashes done, and then they felt like it. And I think they said they felt a little anxiety. They didn't do anything, and it flowed. It's so freeing to know you're never stuck. It's so freeing. Resilience is not something we do, but something that automatically rises when we remove the thinking that is holding it down, just like those balloons. And when you, in that example of maybe getting your eyelashes tinted or fake ones put on, which I think they look so good. Amy McNee recently, who I love on Instagram, she's inspired to write, oh, her eyelashes look so good. My sister had hers done. I'm like, they look so good. So to the eyelash example, there's where it's like, you don't have to do anything. You could be lying there. Anxiety comes. But when you don't resist it, you know what it is, you let it flow, that resiliency automatically rises. It's like you just come back to balance. It's how we're designed. Every time, you've probably known it, every time you've had a panic attack, you come back to balance. And sure, there might be stuff that you do, but it's always within you. That's why sometimes when we're like, oh, I'm going to use ice, I'm going to do my tapping, we give credit to those things when the credit goes to you. You were designed to come back into balance. Whenever our heart beats fast, it comes back to normal. Like we are designed where, if you get startled, sometimes I startle easily. My son and I were like an Easter thing, and I was just chilling, and he came up behind me, and I didn't see him. And he's like, Mom, you were shaking when I touched you. I just got startled. He thought it was like so funny. He's like, you're like, I touched you, but I didn't need to do anything to stop being startled. We are designed to come back into balance. You really are. There's less for you to do. It's like, oh, I overcomplicated it so much trying to journal it out, shake it out, do finger holds, legs up the wall. Like, I thought there was so much more I needed to do to return to balance. I didn't know how beautifully we are designed. That there's nothing we need to do, especially when we just let our thoughts go. Like the snow globe, it's designed to settle when you just set it down. It settles. And number 5, you are made of wisdom and common sense. From The Missing Link. Some believe the brain and the mind are the same, but there has to be a power behind the brain to make it function. The brain is biological, the mind is spiritual. The brain acts like a computer. Whatever you put into it is all you get. This is something that changed my life as well. Realizing that there was something beyond my brain. I don't think I really knew that until 5 years ago. Like knew it in the way that I feel it now. I had really liked spirituality, but this just went deeper. It was like, to me, that brain is like those thinky thoughts, this thing that's narrating. And it was like, oh, this is the divine intelligence that I'm talking about, that you are made of, wisdom and common sense and divine intelligence. Oh, I thought this was interesting. I was trying to look for something about the brain. And this was from an article, your brain doesn't want you to be happy. It wants you to be safe. So the quote is, the most overlooked fact is that your brain isn't wired to make you happy. The main purpose of your brain is to keep you safe and to make sure you survive. Your body, and particularly your brain, doesn't care whether you're happy. According to research published in Science Advances, our brains are 40,000 years old. Now, if you lived 40,000 years ago, survival was indeed your main ambition. So I talk a lot because it's like our brains are very primitive, especially that lizard part of our brain. And what happens with anxiety and panic and OCD is like we put our brain on the job. But our brain is very smart and there's appropriate times for the brain. Not when it comes to mental health and well-being. Really, it's not. We like put the wrong guy on the job. And then it's like survival, forgetting that there's this, forgetting that there's something behind the brain, forgetting there is this power behind the brain that makes it function, that is much wiser, that not only will help us survive, but will help us thrive, be happy and safe. That is wisdom. That is common sense. Our brains are still wired similarly, even though most of us aren't concerned about survival anymore. Instead of saving us from wild animals and death, our brains now try to protect us from all sorts of negative experiences, no matter if that's a heartbreak or an embarrassing moment at a party. Your brain doesn't like surprises. That's why you often think about the next bad thing and prefer being well prepared for negative things that might happen, even if they're unrealistic. That's why sometimes we make a mountain out of a molehill and turn small struggles into huge problems. Isn't that so interesting? I just loved that. I use this analogy often. If you've worked in you've probably heard it, where our brain, like our personal thinking, it's like a loud brass band because it wanted to be loud because it's survival. 40,000 years ago, we need to say like woolly mammoth, tribe that hates you, whatever. It's like, it's loud, it's judgmental, it's urgent. It's urgent because it wants you to survive. But our wisdom and our common sense, it's like a gentle flute. It's always there in the background. It's not urgent. It's judgmental. Has a different feel, though. Sid said that the personal mind, it's like the roar of a lion. And the wise mind, or this universal mind, this divine intelligence, it's like the bleat of a lamb. And the flute, it's always there. We just can't hear it over the loud brass band. And for you all, because maybe you identified as being anxious, this loud brass band of anxious thinking. But it's okay because when the band quiets, in this snow globe example, the band is going. But when you just set it down, it settles and there's the flute. There's the flute wisdom. It's always there. You always have what you're looking for. Brains worry. They love us. They think worrying instead is like survival. Brains worry. They talk about worst case scenario. They dramatize. And they also show us little movies. Like sometimes when my brain worries, it's like, would you like to see a movie of that? And then we're like, no, thank you. Brains worry, and that's okay because your brain is trying to help you survive. But the worry is the opposite of helpful. It's just your imagination, and it blocks your wisdom, common sense, and creativity. I'm in a new trauma advocate program with Rob Cook, and Rob was sharing about worry and fear. And one of Rob's fears was jumping out of an airplane. He was in the military and he was really afraid of jumping out of an airplane. So he made excuses and he never had to jump out of an airplane the whole time he was in the military. But then after he came into the three principles conversation, he was kind of in this thing where he's like, I want to take on my fears, which you don't necessarily have to do, he said, but he's like, I want to jump out of an airplane. So he has a great story that he tells way better than I am going to tell it. But what stuck out with me is, so when he went to do the jump, he was asking all these questions about jumping in and out of an airplane. What about the chutes? And what about this? Just question after question after question after question. And then when he actually jumped out of the airplane, he was terrified, and his wife was going to do it too. And he said he was trying to yell to her, like, stay in the plane. But then actually when his thoughts settled right after, he realized he was really enjoying it. He felt really held. He felt really held. And so then the guy was like, oh, Rob, like do the go cam. And Rob was actually flying the parachute or like navigating it. And then as they're getting closer, he's like, okay, I want to talk to you about landing. And Rob was like, oh my God, I never asked you about landing. Oh my God. And the guy's like, it's fine. It's fine. Just lift your legs. We're going to land now. Just lift your legs. So Rob lifted his legs. They landed, but he was still freaking out. He's like, I forgot to ask about landing. And he was already on the ground, but the guy's like, it's fine, we landed. And Rob shared that because his fear, he asked so many questions about jumping He never asked about landing. It blocked his wisdom and common sense. So when we can see that it's like that yappy band, it's so much more helpful to actually let that go. Start embracing wisdom and common sense, because that's the thing that's going to think about jumping and landing. If there is questions to be asked. And our wisdom and common sense, it's just like a muscle. It's all right if you haven't been using it, if you've been listening to the band more. It's just like any muscle where it's like, I'm here, I'm ready. I'm ready when you start embracing me again. Brains problem solve because they love us and want us to survive, but we can use our feelings as guidance and get onto ourselves and realize there is no problem to solve. They also dramatize and make problems when there are none. And sometimes when you can realize, oh, that's just my brain. And I know some people talk about, sometimes they'll give their anxious brain like a name and a character. I think I already talked about this, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here. What was life-changing for me was when I realized that it was safe not to think so much, because I was made of wisdom and common sense. And it was that wisdom and common sense that got me through every panic attack and every life moment. So I want to share for you, what if it was safe not to think so much? What if it was safe when the band started playing just to let those thoughts settle, let those thoughts flow till there was some different thinking? Sometimes it's the wisest thing to do to stop thinking. But I'm not saying you have to, it's not the resistance. It's just like, I don't need to solve it. I don't need to go there right now. I'm not gonna get on that bus, because wisdom is waiting to break through. It really is. It's always there. It's always there. We just sometimes need to just give it a chance. We just wait a minute. Like if you get lost, sometimes you're frantically thinking, but sometimes you're like, I just need to stop. If you ever do lose your keys, in Mavis, when she started talking about that, like, when you're looking in a bag and you can't find your keys or you can't find your wallet, and then you're just like, oh my God. And you're like, you looked all over your house and you're like, I got to stop. And you stop trying. And then what comes to you is, you went hiking on Friday, your keys are in your hiking backpack in the closet. You're like, oh yes. We needed to let it settle. Often, the wisest thing is to send our brain on holiday. I talk about that a lot, and I definitely have a whole video on it on some of my courses. But it's like sometimes we think something's so important, and it's like we tell our brain, like, hey brain, this is a job for you. Your brain's like, on it, boss, on it. But it is not so wise, because it is like a computer. I once recently put my brain on the job. As I said, I have diabetes, and I usually am in flow with it. I manage what I eat and how I move and insulin pretty well. I got really turned around when I got a continuous glucose monitor, when I could then see it on my phone. And it was right around Christmas time when I was in Mexico. And it was like, it seemed like, oh my God, like it was so up and down. And I started having so much thinking about it. And I tried this different way of eating. And I read all these books and I watched all this stuff. And I was so in my head. And I was so miserable. And then I had an insight. I'm like, oh my God, I put my brain on the job and it's fucking it up. Because I wasn't being guided by my wisdom and common sense. My brain was so focused on survival that I was just like ping-ponging. And when I realized that, I'm like, I got tears in my eyes, because that's all that happened. And having that insight is enough. Like, oh my God, I put the wrong guy on the job. I didn't do anything. I actually filmed a video. I didn't post it because I'm not a good actress, but I was being my wisdom, packing a bag full of jean shorts and bikinis, and then my brain was sitting here, and my brain's like, where are you going? My wisdom was like, I'm not going anywhere. You are going on holiday. I think I show you, maybe not. Michael Neal has a great podcast episode on Send Your Brain on Holiday. So check out his podcast, Caffeine for the Soul, if you're like, I want to know more about sending my brain on holiday. I also love this quote, that in the intuitive mind is a sacred gift. The rational mind is a faithful servant. We've created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. And I think of that, where the rational mind, to me, kind of like more the brain, the intellect, It's a faithful servant. And that's just what I had happened. I'd kind of put that rational mind, my brain, on the job of diabetes. And sometimes we can do that where it's like intrusive thoughts or our health or the health of somebody we love. But the intuitive mind, that's that wisdom and common sense. It is a sacred gift. It really is. And you've got it, every one of you. Oh, so some quotes that I feel like that point to this divine intelligence, this universal mind, this wisdom and common sense. It's funny jumping out of an airplane. This is from Eben Alexander's book, Proof of Heaven. And this was when Eben was talking about jumping out of an airplane and his friend Chuck's chute opened at the wrong time. And so he had to act fast. He said, "It was as if presented with a situation that required more than its usual ability to respond. My brain had become for a moment superpowered. As marvelous a mechanism as the brain is, it was not my brain that saved my life that day at all. What sprang into action the second Chuck's chute started to open was another, much deeper part of me, a part that could move so fast because it was not stuck in time at all, the way the brain and the body are. That's mind. That's wisdom. That's common sense. That's this divine intelligence. Oh, that's what we want to start embracing." This is from Mara Gleason's book, One Thought Away, when Mara was robbed at gunpoint. She said, "The voice that was always yip-yapping in my head just shut up. The one that is constantly chit-chatting about where to go and what to do, asking how I'm feeling, how do I look, and what do I want to talk about, what's next in life, yada yada, so on and so forth all day long. It just stopped. It was as somehow it knew something. I say it because in that moment I felt myself go away, and some bigger intelligence kicked in that knew more than I did. It understood that Mara's little yipper-yapper was irrelevant. There was nothing in the realm of me that had any knowledge of how to deal with this situation. So without intentionally doing it, I simply shut up and got out of the way. Or that larger intelligence knew to put me to the side, much like you would push a clueless, distracted pedestrian out of the way of an oncoming bus to save their life. All of my thoughts, all the noise that usually makes up the mind and the identity of Mara Gleason went quiet. In that silence, something amazing occurred. And that divine wisdom, that guidance, is not only available in a crisis. You don't have to be at gunpoint or jumping out of an airplane. That wisdom is waiting to break through at the ordinary moments as well. It's always there. You might be saying, "All right, this sounds good, but I don't know how. I don't know how to turn off that yipper-yapper. I don't know." That's okay. I don't know how to send my brain on holiday. I don't know how to have peace from within. That's very much what a brain would say, right? Because it's our brain, it's the intellect. It's like, I want to know how. Tell me the plan. And how is just by insights. And so it's so okay. I got to talk to one of my mentors and teachers, Linda Pransky, today about that I don't know feeling. Because before I know always comes I don't know. It's okay if your brain is like, I don't know. Because remember, your wisdom and common sense, it knows. As our consciousness ascends, we regain purity of thought and in turn regain our feelings of love and understanding. And I put that quote there because as your consciousness ascends, that's where the answers are. There is a part of you that knows that love is the answer, and there's always an answer. It's just often not where you're looking. It's not in the intellect. It's not in the past. It's not in analyzing. And I put there's your brain, and it might be like, I want you to tell me a 5-step plan, but what I'm offering is deeper. And that's why I put it behind the brain. Oh, there is that part of you that knows. You are made of divine wisdom and intelligence, no exceptions. I'd already kind of touched on this, but higher and lower levels of consciousness do not imply better or worse, good or bad. Better and worse are merely value judgments ascribed by people using the power of thought. Nor does the existence of levels imply we should strive to be at higher levels. With the 3 principles, there are no shoulds. There is no trying to get anywhere. Levels of consciousness is merely a description of what is. When the wise tell us to look within, they are directing us beyond intellectual analysis of personal thought to a higher order of knowledge called wisdom. And that's what I'm inviting you to do. This is from Sid gave a talk, and it's from Beyond Psychology. So it was transcribed. And if you've heard Sid talk, you might imagine his voice. You can almost hear the silence. And that's what you're searching for. You're searching for silence. Everybody in the universe searches for silence, whether they know it or not. Because everybody in the universe is that one same superconscious state, playing the game of life. And in this game of life, we all search for ourselves. Now that's just words saying we all search for ourselves. When I say selves, I mean inner selves, the thing that created the life in the first place. Now consciously, most of us are not aware of this, but if you're searching for happiness, if you're searching for tranquility, if you're searching just to have a nice, peaceful, loving, understanding life, in actual fact, you're searching for your inner self, because from the inside, this is the only place that the truth can be found. And I'll end on this. If we want more peace of mind and wisdom in our lives, all we have to do, and it's do in quotes, is recognize when our minds are at peace, when our wisdom speaks to us, and not accept what our thinking is telling us when we don't feel that way. When our mind clears, peace and wisdom appear. It bears repeating again and again. What we are looking for appears automatically when our mind clears. And so that is it for today, for this moment. I hope it was helpful.